Every great adventure begins with a bold idea. And for Jesse and Christine, that idea was to build their very own A-frame cabin, from scratch, inside a peaceful forest in northern Ontario. Before the exciting part could begin, they had to tackle the not-so-photogenic jobs. They spent the previous fall digging trenches for water and electricity, installing a massive septic tank, and building a raised septic field. It was muddy, exhausting work that probably didn't make anyone feel like a TV carpenter. But every great cabin needs a solid foundation, literally. With the concrete footings cured, they began forming sturdy foundation columns using sonotubes. Steel rebar from the footings was carefully tied into new reinforcement, creating one continuous, rock-solid structure. Fresh concrete filled each tube before metal brackets were precisely positioned, setting the stage for everything that would follow. Next came the massive support beams. Before installation, every exposed edge received a protective moisture coating to help the wood survive years of Canadian weather. One by one, the beams were secured to the brackets, while Jesse constantly checked measurements. A simple string line stretched across the foundation became his secret weapon, making sure every beam sat perfectly in line. After all, being close enough in construction usually means saying, "uh-oh," later. Then came one of the biggest milestones, the first towering A-frame truss. Lifting it into position demanded equal parts patience, teamwork, and courage. Once upright, it was immediately braced to keep it steady. Each additional truss taught them something new. They adjusted temporary supports, improved their lifting method, and refined the rigging with every attempt. Even so, the heavy frames had minds of their own, twisting, sagging, and refusing to cooperate. Fortunately, persistence proved stronger than stubborn timber. As more A-frames were installed and connected together, the entire skeleton transformed. What first seemed flexible and uncertain gradually became rigid and dependable, revealing the unmistakable shape of their future cabin. The next phase focused on enclosing the structure with OSB sheathing. Starting from the lower walls and steadily working upward, every panel strengthened the frame while protecting it from the elements. With each sheet secured, the cabin felt noticeably more solid. Attention then shifted skyward. Jesse carefully rolled out synthetic roofing underlayment across the steep roof. Unlike traditional tar paper, it was lighter and easier to handle, though the roof's sharp angle made every step a careful balancing act. Rather than trust luck, Jesse engineered custom roof jacks that perfectly matched the roof pitch, creating sturdy work platforms. It was another reminder of his remarkable problem-solving skills and craftsmanship. When the job demanded a better tool, he simply built one. Working nearly 35 feet above the ground wasn't for the faint-hearted. As the final OSB panels reached the peak, the once open frame had become a weather-tight shell. The next delivery was impossible to miss. Towering metal roof panels arrived, each stretching nearly 35 feet long and 16 inches wide. They weren't just oversized sheets of steel. They were the cabin's future shield against snow, rain, and everything a Canadian winter could throw at it. The final challenge was installing the standing seam metal roof. Looking at the towering cabin, doubts naturally crept in. Could just 2 people really pull this off? But with stacks of metal panels waiting below, there was only one option left: keep climbing, trust their skills, and finish what they had bravely started. The single piece became the reference for every panel that followed. Wrestling a 35-foot sheet of metal into position wasn't exactly graceful. It looked a bit like trying to convince a giant aluminum noodle to cooperate. But once it finally snapped into place, the roof began to take shape, and the scale of their dream suddenly felt very real. With the roof progressing, Jesse turned his attention back to the cabin's structure. Since different areas of the floor would carry different loads, he reinforced the framing accordingly. Triple laminated beams strengthened the exterior load-bearing edges, while double laminations supported the interior sections, creating a strong and reliable foundation for everything above. Next came one of the least glamorous jobs of the entire build, working inside the crawlspace beneath the cabin. Lying on damp ground with barely enough room to move, they lifted pressure-treated plywood overhead and fastened it beneath the floor joists. These panels would create enclosed cavities to support the insulation. It wasn't fast, comfortable, or particularly enjoyable. In fact, it was probably the closest either of them came to inventing new yoga poses. Living in northern Ontario means preparing for temperatures that can plunge to -40 degrees, so proper insulation wasn't optional, it was essential. They chose mineral wool insulation because it resists fire, moisture, and pests while holding its shape far better than traditional fiberglass. Layer by layer, they packed the joist spaces completely full, creating an impressive thermal barrier that would keep precious heat inside the cabin during the harshest winters. To protect the floor system even further, they installed a heavy-duty vapor barrier across the entire surface. This continuous membrane prevents warm indoor moisture from reaching the cold structure below, helping avoid condensation and long-term damage. Once that was complete, tongue-and-groove plywood subfloor panels were installed across the cabin. Each sheet locked neatly into the next, transforming a maze of exposed joists into a smooth, sturdy floor. For the first time, they could actually walk through the cabin without carefully balancing every step. Suddenly, it became easy to imagine where the kitchen, living room, and sleeping area would eventually be. Before moving on, they also built a sealed utility box from pressure-treated plywood. This protected enclosure safely guided the water line and electrical conduit into the cabin, while keeping freezing air outside where it belonged. With the insulated floor complete, attention shifted to framing the end walls. Moisture barriers were installed first to protect the timber, followed by heavy structural beams, side framing, and double top plates. Piece by piece, Jesse and Christine continued proving that patience, careful planning, and remarkable craftsmanship could turn a quiet forest clearing into a truly extraordinary home. At this stage, the project becomes much more than assembling timber. It starts becoming a real home. Every stud, every opening, and every connection now has a permanent purpose. The walls decide where sunlight will pour in, where doors will welcome guests, and how every room will eventually feel. It's the point where blueprints begin turning into everyday living spaces. Of course, construction has a funny habit of reminding you who's really in charge. While framing the header above the front entrance, Jesse and Christine discovered that several king studs had been left out of the original layout. That meant pressing the pause button, taking part of the wall apart, and rebuilding it correctly. Once the front wall was corrected and completed, attention shifted to the rear of the cabin. Here, an important but mostly invisible detail came into play: blocking installed between the A-frame trusses. These small structural pieces provide solid fastening points for the walls. They may never earn compliments from visitors, but without them, plenty of other parts wouldn't have anything reliable to attach to. The rear wall also differs from the front because of the loft above it. Instead of relying on a separate beam, the loft floor joists themselves help carry the structural load. Jesse and Christine carefully installed the sill plate, side framing, and top plates, creating a sturdy outline that tied the entire wall securely into the cabin's frame. Next, Jesse covered the loft with plywood sheathing. In an instant, a collection of exposed joists became a solid working platform. It wasn't just safer to move around, it also made the cabin feel like it had officially grown a second floor. The upper section of the back wall demanded extra attention, since it would support a large picture window. Careful measurements and constant double-checking ensured every opening matched the plans perfectly. As always, patience beats rushing. Once framing was complete, OSB wall sheathing went up from the bottom, using full sheets wherever possible. Jesse made sure every panel landed squarely over the wall studs, stopping immediately whenever a seam needed adjustment. They even left small expansion gaps between sheets, allowing the material to naturally expand and contract with changing moisture, instead of buckling later. Sometimes the tiniest gap prevents the biggest headache. Window and door openings required a clever approach. Rather than cutting panels beforehand, they first lifted full sheets into position, traced the openings directly onto them, lowered the panels for cutting, and then reinstalled them. This method was not only faster, but also produced cleaner, stronger walls with fewer unnecessary joints. As the walls climbed higher, ladders quickly became impractical. A construction lift made handling large panels safer and much more efficient. By the time they reached the front wall, everything they had learned on the backside paid off. Progress sped up noticeably, even with numerous window and door openings to work around. By the second day, only a handful of upper panels remained. Soon, the cabin stood completely enclosed. The roof was finished, the walls were solid, and the entire structural shell was finally complete. What had once been an empty clearing in the forest had transformed into a sturdy A-frame home. A remarkable achievement built almost entirely through Jesse and Christine's determination, craftsmanship, and refusal to quit when things became difficult. With the cabin's main structure standing tall, the most important step was wrapping the exterior with a weather-resistant barrier. This protective layer keeps rain, snow, and cold winds from sneaking into the walls, while still allowing trapped moisture inside to escape. It may not be the most exciting part of construction, but it's one of those behind-the-scenes heroes that quietly prevents years of future headaches. At the same time, attention turned to something a little more enjoyable: the front deck. Suddenly, the project wasn't just about construction anymore. It was about imagining future mornings with coffee, relaxing evenings under the stars, and having a front-row seat to the beauty of the surrounding forest. 3 additional Sonotube footings were carefully installed, reinforced with rebar, and filled with concrete to create a solid base. Beam brackets were anchored into the fresh concrete. And laminated structural members were added to tie everything together. With each new layer, the framework became noticeably stronger and more rigid. The deck stretches an impressive 24 feet across the front of the cabin. To support that span, Jesse and Christine laminated multiple pieces of lumber together, creating strong structural beams capable of carrying the load. Blocking was added throughout the frame to stiffen the structure and eliminate unwanted movement. As the deck frame took shape, they decided to add a decorative border around the perimeter. It seemed like a small detail at first, but it completely changed the appearance of the deck, giving it a clean and polished finish. Naturally, this meant revisiting some earlier work, trimming boards, adding extra blocking, and making adjustments. One board after another, the surface quickly transformed. The rhythm became familiar: measure, align, fasten, repeat. And with every board installed, Jesse and Christine moved one step closer to turning their forest dream into a finished home. With every board installed, the deck started looking less like a construction project and more like a place where memories would eventually be made. Another major milestone soon arrived: installing the windows and doors. These weren't lightweight pieces that could simply be dropped into place. Every unit required patience, teamwork, and careful coordination. The front door demanded especially precise handling, as it was lifted, adjusted, checked, adjusted again, and then adjusted one more time just to be safe. Once installed, gaps around the openings were sealed with expanding spray foam and specialized tape, creating an airtight barrier against the elements. Then came perhaps the most intimidating window of the entire project: a massive loft window, measuring roughly 6 feet wide by 7 feet tall. With triple-pane glass adding substantial weight, installing it became a challenge worthy of its own construction episode. Before the windows could be installed, every opening was carefully prepared. Waterproof membranes were applied, shims were adjusted, and every frame was checked to ensure a perfect fit. Working in freezing temperatures and falling snow certainly didn't make the job any easier, but Jesse and Christine stayed focused. Winter wasn't about to convince them to take an early vacation. While the front of the cabin had received most of the attention so far, the rear side was next. Before building the back deck, the foundation needed expansion. To protect the new structure, flashing and waterproof membranes were installed around the back wall and doorway, directing water safely away from the cabin. In construction, one small change often translates into 3 extra hours. To ensure long-term durability, the framing received a moisture-resistant coating before ice and water membrane was installed over critical areas. This extra protection helps prevent water from reaching the wood, an important consideration in Ontario's challenging climate. Soon, the deck boards began going down one by one. Careful spacing was maintained between boards to account for seasonal expansion and contraction. With the cabin finally sealed from the elements, the project moved indoors. The first task was installing roof baffles along the rafters, creating continuous ventilation channels from the eaves to the roof peak. This simple system allows fresh air to flow behind the insulation, preventing moisture buildup while keeping the cabin warm and dry through harsh Canadian winters. Next came the insulation, and suddenly, the cabin felt less like a construction site and more like the beginning of a real home. From here, the focus shifts to electrical work, heating, interior finishes, and all the details that transform an empty shell into a cozy living space. Although the exterior is complete, the adventure is far from over. There are still countless finishing touches ahead before this dream cabin is truly move-in ready. So, be sure to follow Jesse and Christine's journey as they continue turning this beautiful A-frame into the warm, welcoming forest home they've worked so hard to build.